This channel is supported by Truefire. Truefire is an online library
enough, you can get the Truefire All Access Pass for as cheap as they ever do it, the $99 thing. So just jump and do that if you're looking for the best price that you can get Truefire All Access for. A couple of years ago, I was even, I guess, a little bit late to this party, but I'd seen people kind of rumbling about this NAMM, neural amp, you know the thing, NAMM, which is essentially Steve Atkinson put together this thing which rivals Kemper, Neural DSP, and even ToneX, and I think is shown in a bunch of null tests to maybe be the most accurate of these types of things in general. It's free, it's gone wrong, isn't it? It's open source, and I think it has a problem. Here I'm going to be using it in two ways. The first way is through the NAMM player, which you just load into your DAW, and I'm using a steel string singer thing that I found. Wendy Cabs, shout out to them. And I found this on Tone 3000. So I'm using this into my own IR, into the actual DAW. Then the other way was that I was using it with NewX's Amp Academy Stomp, which can load NAMM captures. What's the problem then? So, I feel like there's a few issues with this NAMM stuff. So, the first of which is that I thought actually that this was potentially going to be a little bit of a bigger deal by now. It seems actually, you know, turns out having money to put behind a company is maybe more important than we thought. And things are basically more or less the same pretty much Now let me know if I'm wrong about this, but pretty much as they were when I first checked it out a couple of years ago. One of the changes that's happened is, I think it was called Tone Hunt before when I first kind of checked this out. Tone 3000 seems to be, I think, the consensus place where you would go to get your NAMM captures from. So the issue for me really is that there's no great sort of one central place of energy for this stuff. And you think about ToneX, this is one of the things that ToneX really does have going for it, is that not only are other people creating ToneX captures and bits and pieces like that, but there are these, you know, company projects as well. You think like the Dumble ToneX stuff, you think like the Eddie Van Halen ToneX stuff that is like official and brought into the ToneX space. So there's like this central sort of hub of energy that other people can feed off as well. But it also gives you at least a place to kind of search from, versus kind of NAMM is everywhere. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of, maybe we're just at the early stages of it still, but it just feels like it's like a free technology that maybe we're undervaluing because it's everywhere. So this is the other thing about undervaluing. Like some things like this can run a NAMM capture. So this is like a £235 Chinese modeling piece of gear, but also has NAMM capabilities that were added on. In here, I think this is still the cheapest thing that can run a NAMM capture, which is this little guy, the Sonicake Pocket Master. That's like £60. But between these devices, I also think there's like quality difference. Like obviously, you'd imagine that the signal path and some of the stuff included in here, like physically, is going to be a little bit more robust than a £60 piece of gear, and therefore you'd also imagine that there's going to be some differences tonally. And I think Leo Gibson has actually also shown that within the conversion process of NAMM things, NAMM captures between devices, that there's quality differences there as well. So that's the other kind of thing, which is why, although it's open source, what some of these companies are actually doing to the NAMM captures varies greatly. I did see a post from Steve Atkinson talking about that, and it's kind of then creating another sort of set of issues where, you know, a NAMM capture could sound totally different on here versus here, and that is kind of the problem, that it's been decoupled, or was never really coupled, from the technology, such that you don't really have this problem so much with a Kemper or Neural or whatever like that, because Neural are in charge of, you know, making sure that their captures run properly on the hardware, and, you know, they have control of everything. Same with Kemper, like they have control of their complete signal system, you know, whatever these things actually are underneath the hood. I was a little bit surprised by actually, like, if I pulled up that Dumble style SSS thing, first of all, like into the DAW, it feels and sounds really good, I felt, and was a totally inspiring tone to play. Then I brought it across to the NUX and loaded it on there. And again, still, that's the thing, it's like reliable, it's good, it tends to sound pretty good. I think once you pair it with some things that you're working with. This is another thing I noticed, is that you can add gain and stuff like that within the actual DAW plugin, so you can turn up the gain. On the NUX, you could also turn up the gain, but I don't know if those are equivalent. So, because it's just like a 50 to 100 sort of thing on the NUX, whereas it actually shows you in dB, I think, on the plugin itself. So again, are those equivalent or not? We're not really sure. It's like the Wild West still, and I think there's been a few companies that have jumped on this. At the moment, it seems to be mostly sort of the Chinese companies that are using it to augment their kind of place in the market. So Hotone can run NAMM, NUX, Sonicake, like a lot of these Chinese companies are kind of being ahead of the game on this. The only company that I'm aware of at this moment that have been talked about it, Line 6, who kind of said we might in the future consider running NAMM captures. So with the Helix Stadium, that is, I think that's not been confirmed It's just one of those things that Eric Klein kind of put out there. And I also think Steve Atkinson kind of has gone full time into NAMM. So I think we could see some fairly big changes here quite quickly. I do hope in some ways that he's able to actually turn this into something that makes some money for him, because like a lot of other people are kind of piggybacking off it and profiting off it. And I do worry that maybe he has set it up in a way that possibly doesn't see him getting much return from that. There are a few companies like Dark Glass, I think, with their, what was it called, the Anagram, that can run NAMMs. I think Tonocracy, which was Rob Chapman's thing with Atomic. I think Two Notes have started using it as well, right, with Genome. So there's some uptake with some slightly bigger companies beyond just the Chinese ones as well. And I think at the moment it still seems to me from the online consensus that is it called the Dime Head NAMM player seems to be the best thing in space. I'd like to see like an official piece of hardware from NAMM, maybe, if they're able to kind of sort that out, or work with a company that can kind of bring it all together in a little bit of a more, you know, uniform way. Because at the moment there's like no real standardization to it, and it's all a little bit out there. You think about something like the Quad Cortex particularly, what they've had to do is kind of bring in like some iconography and stuff like that to show, you know, what this capture and all this stuff is. I don't think anyone has really nailed this part of the capture space yet at all. It's still very much like list based, but at least with Kemper, Quad Cortex, at least there's like a central sort of rig manager or the Cortex cloud, which at least keeps you sort of within, you know, some sense of like there being like a centrality. Do you know what I mean? Anyway, at the moment, that's where it is for me. Like, NAMM is great. It's not moved along as quickly as I had maybe hoped. There's been some uptake, but not, as far as I can remember or tell, uptake from a huge company like in the modeling space like Fractal, NeuroDSP or Kemper or anyone like that. At the moment, it's kind of like the Chinese players going that we can do this, none of the other stuff can do that. I'd like to see Steve Atkinson get his money out of this, but also maybe sort of like a more centralized push so that it's not all disparate stuff where you're having to search. Like Tone 3000, I think, is that hub at the moment. But I'd like to see official hardware, the ability to create a NAMM profile capture from a piece of hardware. I think that's also important, and a really important part about what the Nano Cortex kind of represents. And also, yeah, some of these bigger companies hopefully getting involved so that it's not like, it'd be nice to have these things talking to each other, wouldn't it? To be able to run a NAMM capture on pretty much everything, whether you're in line 6 or Fractal or whatever. I don't know whether that's ever realistic to happen, but we can dream. I guess Valiton with the GP5, I think Valiton are the same. There's like shared company stuff with Sonicake, I think. Seems to be the thing at the moment, that there's going to be like a lot of kind of Chinese devices that can do the NAMM thing and effects, be like a full multi-effect. There's no official sort of NAMM thing. Why does any of this matter? I think because there's actually great potential in this NAMM stuff, and it does sound really good, and it's free. I think there's great potential here, but also there's a risk that we just end up just taking it for granted, because, you know, at some point maybe lots of things could do it, but, you know, what's the value of something that costs nothing?